You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Is debt beating you down? You need discipline. You need the Debt Ninja. If you've been caught in a financial trap and need to be set free, then you need the Debt Ninja. Want to stop those harassing collection calls, start saving thousands in interest and fees, and get out of debt fast? Then you need to call the Debt Ninja. The Debt Ninja will find the best companies across the country that will help you consolidate all your bills into one easy payment, reduce your payments by 30 to 50%, and get you out of debt fast. If you have unsecured debt of $10,000 or more, such as credit cards, loans, or medical bills, call the Debt Ninja for a free 15-minute consultation.
Call 800-826-1246. 800-826-1246. That's 800-826-1246. Call today.
The Debt Ninja.
Follow Wenz World Radio on Twitter at WENZ World Radio. Welcome to Wenz World, my friend. Here we go. I think it's fair to say that every guy out there wants to understand the lady that they're with, and sometimes it seems downright impossible. I have the honor today of welcoming my guest, Andrea Tantaros. She is the author of the book Tied Up in Knots, How Getting What We Wanted Made Women Miserable. Now, that's kind of an anomaly because society would say, once we get what we want, we'll always be happy. So, Andrea, in your experience, how has that proven not to be true?
Well, I think that growing up as what I like to call a daughter of the Betty Friedan generation, and Betty Friedan penned the infamous Feminine Mystique, who empowered many housewives to speak out about the problem that they couldn't name, which was that they were trapped in their houses and they couldn't get out and get into the workforce, and they weren't feeling liberated and empowered. So there's been a bunch of us, millions of us, daughters of Betty Friedan, who are the direct beneficiaries of the rise of feminism. I mean, I can say I've reaped all the fruits of feminism. I graduated college and, girls, the doors were opening for us. I mean, we were told we could do anything. The women's magazine said, you go, girl, you can achieve anything. The problem is they didn't tell us that with all this newfound feminine power, there's going to be consequences. There's going to be downsides. And so what you have is you have women more unhappy than ever. There was a big research study done, published in the New York Times, on the declining paradox of female happiness. Why are so many women unhappy? Why, according to Boston College, are women graduating from college with less self-confidence than ever? Why are 26% of women on antidepressants? And why, according to Glamour last year, when they polled all of their female respondents, they couldn't even articulate what being happy means. So I thought, well, something's going on here. All my friends, all the women I know are stressed out. Every woman you talk to is stressed out. So what gives? And I think it's two things. I think the first is the feminists told us that we should be equal with men. And that's true. And that's a rightful goal, and I'm glad they did. But they missed something important. Equal doesn't mean the same. We're not the same. Men and women are very, very different. And feminists have ignored this biological wiring for decades.
I love it.
And so they...
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They encourage women, I think, to be more masculine, to covet what the men had. So I call it the power trade. Women were covetous of men. We wanted their jobs. We wanted, their lifestyles. And feminists pushed this on us. They said, act like men, date like men, negotiate like men. The problem is, we're not men. And so now you have this really emasculated feminine crowd that was told to tell men, we don't need you. We got the door. We got the bill. We got the check. We don't need you. And then you have men who feel like, wait a minute, we're not needed. And if you tell a certain group they're not needed, they start to eventually believe it. So I think it's not just men that are unhappy. I think it's women, too.
That is such a good point. In Chapter 10, you do make it abundantly clear that men don't even think the same way as women, so it's impossible for both sexes to be equal on that plane. And I've been married for 5 years, and I'm still trying to figure it out. And I think every married man wants the secret, the formula to figuring out their own bride. But you're so right. I also love on page 87, you list off 10 ways to handle a powerful female partner. Now, if you could kind of just go through each of those briefly and what that actually means to you and how it can apply in just everyday relationships.
Oh, that's such a good question. And the reason I wrote this list is because if you open any men's magazine, you will see 10 tips all the time on how to pick up a hot woman at a bar.
Right.
You never see tips on how to handle a successful one. And I thought, you know what, maybe I should pen one. The closest that we ever got to men's magazine starting to, maybe understand the mind of the successful female was when Sheryl Sandberg empowered her then husband, and now late husband, David Goldberg, to join up with her and motivate women and men, but especially men, to help their successful partner lean in at home. And that campaign, of course, sadly, has come to a close because he again passed away. But Sheryl Sandberg, author of the popular book Lean In, she said the most important thing a woman can do, and she's a huge liberal, she said, is pick the right partner. That's a traditional message, and it's one that the media, of course, the mainstream media missed. So I decided to put this little list together to give the men some tips, since women are always getting tips on what to do. Yeah. And the first one is be persistent. And I say that one because my better half would probably tell you that it took him a while to get my attention, just because strong women, we're tough. We're very, very tough. And it's hard for us to turn off that toughness that maybe we espouse in our day jobs, in our personal lives. So I didn't really soften to him right away. So that's why I put be persistent, because we can be a bit difficult at first if you're trying to, woo us romantically. 2 is don't patronize her. Most women are pretty smart, and so no one wants to be patronized. Give her space. Women have so many newfound freedoms. Women are getting married later. They're having children later. So just like men used to wait a bit longer, women are doing that too now. So they have their own lives and their own interests, and they likely don't want to be smothered. So just give her some space. Love her wild side. Just embrace her no matter what. Because if she's strong and she's successful, she's probably got a little bit of a wild streak in her.
Yeah.
And that matches her flame with his, obviously. Don't try and tame her, just admire her. That's just unconditional love. Love her for who she is, even if she is strong, even if she is a little tough sometimes. Don't try and change that fire. Treat her like an equal. Everyone wants that, women and men. So I added that to the list because I think it's important to both genders. Savor her strength. I think it's a turnoff to men when women are really, really strong. And it's something that I address with women. It's, something I've had to manage too, is being really strong. But I think that strength that you like in her, that maybe you were initially attracted to, that's going to serve you well if she decides to obviously stay with you for the long haul, because you're going to want a strong woman in your corner, because life is hard. It's not easy, so you want the strongest partner possible, and the strongest, if you decide to go on that route, mom for your kids. So that's why you should never try and intimidate her, want her to be weak, I should say. Match her fire with yours. I love this one. This is personal to me as well. The fire in the belly of a strong, tough, successful woman, up your game. She probably will like it. So if you have a fire in your belly, don't extinguish it because hers is, flaming. Just pour some gas on yours and build a bigger bonfire together. Number 9, if you can't handle the heat, move it along. If you can't handle the heat, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Right.
Just keep going. You're probably not the right fit for her, and she'll find somebody else. Don't waste your time. And the last one is buckle up. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
It really is. A lot of good points there. Now, I noticed the overarching theme of strength. Part of your book, in the early part, maybe chapter 2, you talk about applying your potency selectively. Now, can you go into exactly what that means and how it could be applied in everyday situations with married couples?
Sure. The example that comes to mind is professionally, off the top of my head. When I first moved to New York City to do political campaigns, it was a different environment than Washington, D.C., and it was a pretty big boys' club. And I remember being the only woman in the room numerous times, which was, again, very different from Washington, D.C., on Capitol Hill, where women have really moved up in Washington, D.C., especially in politics, and they've permeated a lot of corners of politics. Not so much here in the Empire State. I remember at the time sitting in a room, it was all men at the conference table, older than I was, very tough New York men. And I remember them suggesting different ideas for our candidate. Our candidate was a woman. And I didn't believe that any of the ideas would work. And they were so bad that I thought, okay, strong Andrea, tough Andrea wants to stand up and say, you guys are all wrong, and this is going to fail, and you guys aren't going to win, and we shouldn't do this because this isn't her, and I'm telling you it's going to backfire. But I knew that it wouldn't be well received if I delivered it that way, because sometimes it's not maybe the messenger, it's the way that the message is delivered. So I softened the rhetoric, and I just went on record and said, I don't think this is a wise idea. Here's why. And they ignored me, and sure enough, their idea failed.
How about that?
And sometimes the credibility that you build are the things that, not even that you say and the way that you say it, but the things that you don't say. And I never rubbed it in anyone's face that I was right and they were wrong. They already knew it. And so the next meeting went very, very differently.
Right? I can only imagine.
There's a way to apply that power selectively and that potency selectively. You really do have to know your audience. And I would say that personally, and I write about this a lot in the book, power in any relationship destroys intimacy. Power is something that women were after, and they got it. But they got it, again, at the expense of men.
This is such good stuff. Here with author Andrea Tantaros of Fox News. She wrote the book Tied Up in Knots, How Getting What We Wanted Made Women Miserable. Andrea, we are up against a hard break, but let's pick this up again next week.
Thank you for having me on and for reading it and having such detailed and fantastic questions and such terrific insight. Thank you so much for supporting this book. It means the world to me.
Miss Tantaros, you're so kind. We'll talk soon.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it. There to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
It's an absolute honor to have Andrea Tantaros back. You may have seen her on the Fox News channel on shows such as Outnumbered and The Five. She's authored the book Tied Up in Knots, How Getting What We Wanted Made Women Miserable. Andrea, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit last week, and I've gotten through some of your book. We actually had a listener that had a question for you, and here it is.
Hi, Andrea. I'm loving getting through Tied Up in Knots, and I do have a question about the chapter on porn. We talked about watching TV shows and so forth, but where do you think watching porn and it actually becomes an addiction and does affect sexuality between two people, is it considered an addiction, and at what point it can become a real issue between partners in marriage when someone is addicted to porn and they no longer need the touch of another human being? So that's what I'd love to hear more about. Thank you.
Great question. What say you, Andrea?
Mm-hmm. Well, like I say in the book, I don't pretend to be a sexpert, and I'll leave a lot of the analysis to the sexperts. But from the qualitative research I've done with women and men, the addiction to porn seems to be a couple things, and this is what's frustrating women. One is that they find that their partner is not engaging with them as much, that they're not as into them as before. And a lot of these girls have told me they've actually caught their partners watching it, which is really, hurtful to them. And then they have what men used to have, which is performance anxiety, because they feel that they have to emulate the women in these videos and that they're, of course, not good enough. And a lot of these girls have said, listen, it makes me wonder if he's sort of opting out of intimacy with me because he's substituting it in the relationship. Now, you'll talk to a number of, as I said, sexperts, and they'll say that pornography should be a supplement, not a substitute for intimacy. But I think what you're finding is men are turning to it increasingly because it's just easier. I mean, it's very antisocial behavior, but it's much easier than dealing with a woman and, having to take her out on a date and having to actually work for it and put in the effort. And because it's so easily accessible that they can download it on, I call them smut phones, not smartphones, that it's so easy. You used to have to get in your car and drive to one of those, I remember growing up seeing those, windowless brick buildings by the airport with the neon lights, and there was some shame involved in it. Or you'd have to go to that back room in the Blockbuster video or the Hollywood video with the beads on it.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't exist anymore. You can just do it from the privacy of your own home. So again, there's no shame involved. It's easier for men to access, and they're using it as a substitute for intimacy with women, and women are just livid about it. They're just very upset about it. It's one of the things that they talk about a lot. And again, they feel like then they have to compete or they're not good enough, and it's destroying intimacy. And I will say this, there's tons of research and anecdotal articles in men's magazines that I've seen pop up recently where men have said they've actually given up porn because they found themselves looking at it so often, and it was affecting them. It was affecting them in the sense that they didn't even want to be with a real woman. That they just were saying, oh my gosh, it's been a couple weeks and all I'm doing is, looking at pornography. I'm going to stop. Because they've called themselves out and said, I'm addicted. I think it was an Esquire GQ magazine. And they found that after a month of quitting cold turkey and doing without, they actually felt intimate again. Like they felt like they wanted to be with a woman. They felt better about themselves. And they didn't want to get back into the habit because it was causing damage and it was causing them to not want to interact or be intimate with women, which is ultimately, let's be honest, what men want. Men want to be around women and they want the touch of a woman. So again, this goes back to that feminist argument that it was making women and men unhappy, and pornography and the mainstreaming of porn, meaning it's everywhere. Kim Kardashian's Paper magazine cover where she posed naked in a martini glass would have been, when you and I were younger, it would have been considered triple X rated and pornographic. And now it's just in every Twitter feed, as just normal material that you'll see online. So there's a mainstreaming of pornography and we become desensitized to it. And that's really dangerous. And that's dangerous for both genders. And you don't have to take my word for it. Like you can just listen to, like I said, all the sexperts and testimonials from men themselves.
So we've obviously seen how social media sites like Tinder, how we're swiping, it's almost an instantaneous hookup with people that we've never met. How do you think and predict this culture of social media hookups is going to impact American society and the family structure?
Well, it's destroying intimacy between two people, which is desperately what people need to sustain and coexist. I don't know anyone that wants to live their life alone for the rest of their lives. It's just not realistic. So what you're seeing now is not just a breakdown of intimacy and monogamy, but there's health concerns involved in this. There are safety concerns, as you mentioned. You don't even know the person on the other, end of that computer conversation. So there's health issues, safety issues. There's a breakdown of relationships, again, which is why I wrote the book. Women are miserable about this. Going from man to man to man is not the ideal scenario for most women, especially when the guy isn't calling them back the next day. I don't know any woman that says, this is so awesome. I don't even know his last name, and he didn't call me the next day. And his profile's still on Tinder, which means he's hooking up with all these other girls. So that means that I was actually not important to him at all. High five. Yeah. It just doesn't exist. And we're being convinced that it's the best way to go. Last week, Vogue put out a column that said Tinder can really open up your social circle. I'm thinking, wow, that's an interesting spin. We'll talk about propaganda. Yeah, it'll open up your social circle if you want a very temporary, social circle by the hour.
Right.
It's a hookup site, and these relationships that come out of Tinder, again, aren't relationships. So it's being misbranded, and the way that we talk about Tinder is all wrong, too. I mean, conservatives won't talk about it. Liberals spin that it's great. But it's causing also women to degrade themselves by, sexting with these guys, sending pictures that then can be used as revenge porn, which is a huge issue. And then men who tell me, if I get a picture from a woman or if a woman comes over or hooks up with me that I met on Tinder, I am unlikely to commit to her or try and make her a girlfriend or a fiance or a wife, because I think if you have your profile on Tinder, you're advertising it for all men to see. And if you just sort of give it up to me because you feel pressured to, because if you don't, you think I'm going to dump you and move on to the next woman, which is what women say. If you're doing that, you're not somebody that I want to spend a lot of time with. Yeah,
that's so true. I mean, really, any guy that's on those sites isn't going to call a girl a second time if he already got what he wanted on the first time.
Right. Exactly. And I have not heard, I've said that, it's honest. I know it's hard to hear for women. My big brother, Dean, gave that, sort of advice to me growing up. He said, listen, you got to give us something to come back for.
Yeah.
And it's the truth. It's the cold, hard truth. And to the women who didn't have a big brother as caring as mine was, to be honest with me and give me the cold, hard, real facts about how the male mind works, I don't know what other women are doing. And that's why I wrote this book, because I wish I had this book in my 20s. And when I went to look for a book like it, there are none. There are no honest books since Women Are From Mars, or Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, that actually tackle the issues of the modern 21st century dating world. So I decided to write the book that I wanted to read and that I thought could really do a good service to women who, again, don't have big brothers and don't have men in their lives that will sit them down and say, if you send a naked picture to a man, he's not likely to stay with you or commit to you or consider you, wife material.
Right.
And women need to hear it. They don't hear it. They don't hear the cold, hard truth. They only hear the propaganda from magazines like Vogue that, frankly, don't know what the heck they're talking about.
Such fantastic insight from author Andrea Tantaros. Tied Up in Knots, How Getting What We Wanted is the name of the book. Available on Amazon. Check it out. Thanks again for your time today, Andrea.
Oh, thank you. The pleasure's been all mine. Thanks again.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of the short story through to the line edits of the full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
So we've all seen those TV shows where there's some weird forensics involved and possibly the supernatural. With me now is acclaimed novelist and defense attorney, Mr. Christopher Leibig. He just wrote the brand new novel, Almost Mortal, with the overarching premise of the supernatural in a natural world. Thanks for your time. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Joey.
Oh, of course, of course. Back in medieval Europe, there were animals held responsible morally for things that took place against human beings. It's kind of weird to think about that, like pigs and rats, donkeys and others being held to trial, possibly facing the death penalty or exile from their specific countries. Obviously, things have changed big time. But what are some of the more outlandish court cases you can recall in legal history where there was the supernatural involved?
Well, just touching back on your medieval point, I mean, interestingly enough, that was religion-based, and there were certain religious views back then that have evolved and are different from now. And I mean, these days, obviously, we put humans on trial. the book Almost Mortal touches on that because it is about how the legal process could possibly manage creatures that appear like humans but actually aren't purely human. When you talk about history, though, obviously one thing that comes to mind that everybody thinks about and gets mentioned a lot would be something like the Salem witch trials, where, in fact, the evidence against these people was itself supernatural, which is the people having visions, conjuring up falsities, saying that it was coming from God, and that, that's in the colonies. It's now the United States, and yet they were still giving people the death penalty based on whether they weighed more than a duck and a wood and all this other kind of stuff, whether they floated or drowned. And so that's a historical backdrop to what you're saying right there. The Salem witch trials, where the evidence itself was, in fact, spiritual rather than evidence-based. And that wasn't even that long ago. I mean, I think one thing that Almost Mortal touches on is if one of these creatures who's descended from a god, an angel, does not have a human father, such as Jesus, actually appears in a court and demonstrates this to be true, how does the law deal with that?
It's not far-fetched because there are a lot of things that just don't make sense in this world. Even in a case like in the Ghostbusters ruling, in 91, the New York Supreme Court held that a house, which the owner had previously advertised to the public as haunted, was legally haunted, right? Because it was reported as haunted. How on earth is that possible?
Yeah, and you know what that reminds me of is something that is in the book, which is that we all know that people have, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we all know that people have varying degrees of intuition, let's say. That some people seem extraordinarily good at it, others good at other things, but almost to the point of maybe mind reading or the like. And that there's some people walking around who are simply good at that, but they just chalk it up to intuition or whatever they do. Now, in the book, there are people who are perfectly normal humans, but over the course of generations bear a relation to these characters who are only half human. And those people have some of these gifts.
And this book that Chris is talking about is called Almost Mortal, and it's available on Amazon and on his website. You got to check out his site, guys. ChrisLeibig.com, ChrisLeibig.com. So, Chris, what about those cases where the death penalty could possibly be involved? And I mean, in light of a faith structure where there's already so much division in the modern day church about the relevancy of the death penalty in light of Old Testament and New Testament scripture.
Let's say, for example, there's a serious decision for a jury to make. Implicitly or even explicitly, both sides are calling upon some kind of faith or religious views. And that comes up a lot. And I mean, I think that one thing you sometimes hear jurors say during jury selection is this concept of an eye for an eye, and or other religious concepts that seem to bear upon the idea that Christianity teaches us that punishment has a high value. And that's obviously debatable in the Bible. I mean, eye for an eye is in the Old Testament. You can find plenty of things in the Gospels that would suggest that Jesus himself actually believed in forgiveness, not so much as earthly punishment, and then you can find other things that go against that. So that kind of idea does come up. It usually isn't directly argued a lot, but it's more implied in the way people discuss their opinions and make arguments to a jury or something about what does our faith tell us about punishing people on earth. What would Jesus, let's say, think about the fact that America has the most prisoners on earth, most of them nonviolent, and this kind of stuff. So you can argue that on both sides. It's amazing how many people with the same faith just flat out disagree about that.
I mean, for instance, I was just listening to a message the other day about the woman who was caught in adultery. There was like no gossip about it. She's like caught in the act. She's dragged right in front of Christ's feet, and he draws a line in the sand. So in the court of law, specifically because we are a Judeo-Christian society based on those fundamental beliefs, it could get kind of sticky. In our eyes, justice is right now. I need an answer, even if it possibly isn't justice, maybe even in some of these race cases that we've seen within the last few years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some people would say, that particular part of Jesus' life, some people would say he was actually ruling on a death penalty case right then, during which he said, those among us without sin can cast the first stone. And some people do use that for support of the likelihood that he didn't believe in that form of punishment. On the other hand, people argue it another way, too. I mean, she was just accused of adultery, and the cases that come before courts now aren't about that. I think the biggest thing they tell you, though, and I would never personally violate this, is when it comes to talking about faith, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it in any direct way, because you do not know what people think. Everybody feels differently and very powerfully. And the danger of running across people's sensibilities on this is extremely high.
The thought of applying your faith in a defense case, Islamic culture that we're seeing now, where things are being done in the name of a book, in the name of a God that nobody has ever seen, in Allah. Mm-hmm. So do you foresee America ever embracing the ideals truly of the Quran in light of the court?
No. What you're talking about, radical Islam, and the people who, let's say, would be on trial for a terrorist act, who are still claiming that it was the will of God to do so, I just don't see that catching traction in any part of mainstream America, because that isn't the main message being punched forward by today's Christianity at all, even though go back a couple hundred years, that's different. But right. No, I think that goes against the cultural morals of the United States too strongly to be accepted. Now, I do think if a defendant like that is very, very young, had no other people to teach them how to think in this, that person, maybe that it would be mitigating that they came to believe this through believing in their faith, and then over time might see that was wrong. I believe a lot of people who commit these kind of acts have been in that situation, uneducated.
That is so good. Again, if you're just joining us, I am with novelist Chris Leibig, author of Almost Mortal, available on his website, Chris Leibig, Leibig.com, and also on Amazon. And you can connect with Chris on the Twitter sphere at Chris Leibig. Chris, thank you so much for your time today, man. This has been so much fun. I love dealing with the abstract in a concrete kind of way.
Well, Joey, I'm around anytime. Good luck.
Is debt beating you down? You need discipline. You need the Debt Ninja. If you've been caught in a financial trap and need to be set free, then you need the Debt Ninja. Want to stop those harassing collection calls? Start saving thousands in interest and fees and get out of debt fast? Then you need to call the Debt Ninja. The Debt Ninja will find the best companies across the country that will help you consolidate all your bills into one easy payment, reduce your payments by 30 to 50%, and get you out of debt fast. If you have unsecured debt of $10,000 or more, such as credit cards, loans, or medical bills, call the Debt Ninja for a free 15-minute consultation.
Call 800-826-1246. 800-826-1246. That's 800-826-1246. Call today.
The Debt Ninja.
Welcome to Wenz World. It's Weird Science Time.
Oh yeah, Weird Science Time. We brought the expert Dr. Fuzz Rana of Reasons to Believe, found online at reasons.org. Back to Wenz World. Dr. Fuzz, how are you?
Doing great, Joey. How are you?
Doing fantastic. You know, this week's subject can be a tad edgy, so for those of you with little ones in the car, feel free to earmuff it. And they've had their opportunity. So there you have it. And today's subject is sex brings men closer to God. And I can't tell you how many times I've screamed out the name of my creator during this experience. And it has a lot to do with the love hormone oxytocin, which not only promotes social closeness and helps in childbirth during delivery, but also triggers increased feelings of religiousness. Now, Dr. Fuzz, this so-called study, who did it and what did they find?
Yeah, well, Joey, this also might explain, too, why people don't believe in God, because, if you're not having sex frequently enough, that could make you pretty angry. But all kidding aside, this is actually, very serious work done by a team of researchers from Duke University, and what they were doing was essentially trying to establish whether or not oxytocin release from the hypothalamus in the brain actually promotes a greater sense of spirituality. And so they took a group of 83 men, broke them into two groupings. One got a placebo, one got a dose of oxytocin, and they showed that for those people that were administered oxytocin, they had a greater sense of spirituality, and they also had a greater positive experience when they did things like meditate. And in fact, that experience lasted for up to a week after administering the dose of oxytocin. And furthermore, they found that there were two different genes with particular variants or versions of those genes that seemed to make individuals much more susceptible to a spiritual experience, whether they were believers or non-believers. And so they are arguing that there's a biological basis for belief and for spirituality related to oxytocin release in the brain.
Now, when we're talking about this love chemical, again, if you're just joining us, we are with Dr. Fuzz Rana from Reasons to Believe. You can find him online, reasons.org. Connect on Twitter at RTB_FRANA. Now, Dr. Fuzz, we were talking about the experiment with the two groups. One received the actual oxytocin, the other the placebo. Now, what kind of other external factors, let's say there are other medications or maybe even street drugs that help us release this chemical? And is it similar to dopamine in terms of the happy juice, so to speak?
Yes. Well, when it's released from the hypothalamus into the forebrain, it functions like a neurotransmitter, just like dopamine. When it's released into the bloodstream, it's functioning like a hormone. But in the study, they controlled for medications, they controlled for, age and all those other types of factors, such that they could see what appeared to be this one-to-one correlation between oxytocin administration and, again, the spirituality response. And so it looks like, again, what seems to be driving that response is not only, again, the oxytocin release, but the genetic makeup of the subjects who, again, responded either to a greater or lesser degree to the spirituality as a result of the oxytocin release.
Now, you mentioned that the group studied were 83 men. Would women have the same kind of response, or?
Well, at this point, nobody really knows the answer to that question. There's not been a comparable study done with women. I think that's the follow-up to it. So at this point, we can only conclude that for men, oxytocin release does seem to be, again, related to the spiritual experience that they would have.
Now, you also mentioned that it was released from the hypothalamus, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and it's not created, but they were given a dose of it. So is the natural stuff more potent, or can it be mimicked completely from scientists?
Yeah, that's a really good question you're asking. And again, it's not really clear what effect just simply administering it externally has compared to its release from the hypothalamus. So again, that's another factor to consider when trying to interpret the results. But it's comparable to what's seen in other studies where people, again, will have oxytocin administered to them and they have a greater sense of empathy. They are more altruistic. They tend to do things that are positive in terms of social bonding. But also there's other studies that show that for people that are self-professed Christians, they claim to have transformative religious experiences. And when they do make those claims, they tend to have higher levels of oxytocin in their blood than people who don't claim those experiences. So what they're doing through administering it externally probably has validity from a biological standpoint.
So would it be fair to assert that some people, religious people, I guess people, faith-based people, have more of this chemical living in their hypothalamus, or? Well,
that's what, skeptics would probably argue, is that at the end of the day, our spirituality has nothing to do with truly encountering God, but rather just simply some kind of biological phenomena that seems to be mediated by oxytocin.
So what do you think about that?
Well, as a Christian, these results actually don't trouble me whatsoever because the view that I have of a human being is that humans are brain, mind, and spirit, and that the brain, the mind, and the spirit are all interacting with each other. They're kind of interdigitated together. And so that being the case, and being that we are made to be in a relationship with our Creator, we were made to be in a relationship, men and women, we were meant to have children, to multiply and to fill the earth, it makes sense that a Creator would put in place a biological mechanism that would, basically bond men to women, bond mothers and fathers to their children, bond people together in community, but also be something that could bond us to our Creator. And so I don't see the fact that there's a biological component to our spirituality as being troubling, because I think what happens with our brain influences our mind and influences our spirit. But I would also argue that what happens to us spiritually can influence our thinking, our mind, and can influence our brain and our physiology. So it works both ways.
Well, as always, Dr. Fuzz Rana, you're blowing my mind here in Wenz World. You are just a fantastic guest, always with the keenest of insights. Found online again, reasons.org. Connect with Dr. Fuzz Rana on Twitter at RTB_FRana. And of course, you can contact the organization via the Twitter sphere at RTB_official. Dr. Fuzz, thank you as always for taking the time out here in Wenz World. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joey. It's been a blast.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it. There to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Welcome to Wenz World. It's weird science time.
Oh, yes, it is weird science time. And of course, you know, we bring our good friends back to Wenz World from Reasons to Believe. You can find them online, reasons.org, out there in the great state of California. Joining us now is Dr. Fazal Rana, better known as Dr. Fuzz here in Wenz World. How are you, Dr. Fuzz?
Doing well, Joey. How about you?
We're doing great here. And it's so funny. Anastasia, our good friend out there at reasons.org, sent us a press release about some unusual applications from earwax. Now, I usually use earwax as an excuse that I didn't hear what the last person I spoke to said. But scientists are actually using this for more practical applications. And I was hoping that you could help fill in the gaps here.
Yeah, well, I sure could. You may not think much about earwax other than, ooh, that's pretty gross when it comes off of the end of a Q-tip, but it's actually pretty amazing stuff. It's a mixture of kind of waxy, hence the name, fatty materials, as well as shed skin cells from the skin lining of the inner ear, and also hair. And so kind of sounds rather gross, but those components give earwax remarkable properties. It's an excellent water repellent, but yet it allows for the flow of air through the plug of earwax, and then the hair forms a meshwork that traps dust particles, and the earwax also has substances in it from the cells, the cellular debris, that give it antibacterial and antifungal properties. So it's a pretty amazing stuff. And scientists from the Georgia Institute of Technology were looking at how they could capitalize on this really remarkable set of properties to produce filters that could be used for electronics.
Now, you mentioned that it has some filtration properties that will allow air to pass through but not water. How is that possible?
Well, the components of earwax are like fatty acids and fatty alcohols, squalene, and cholesterol, and these are compounds that don't like water. And so if you have a big mass of those kind of materials, the water is going to beat up on its surface, but it won't be able to pass through. And so you kind of have this plug in your ear that just keeps water away, but yet air can flow through those kind of materials.
So Dr. Fuzz, if we were able to syndicate or make synthetic earwax, what kind of functional jobs could that product do in modern-day society?
Well, what they probably will do is try to come up with synthetic compounds that will replicate the properties of earwax, keeping in mind, again, the types of chemical components and the hair and, again, the cellular debris, and try to match that with, relatively inexpensive synthetic materials so they could, again, produce these types of filtering systems. One of the things that's interesting about earwax that may actually play a role in the new technology is the fact that it's called a non-Newtonian fluid. And that's a $25 term that just simply means that at rest it is like a solid material, but as soon as you apply pressure to it, it actually flows like a fluid. And so the researchers think that the movement of the jaw actually causes the earwax to flow in our ear, so that as it begins to accumulate debris, that flowing motion will take the dirty earwax out of our ear. And then, of course, as it accumulates dust particles, it also becomes flaky, so it just kind of falls out of our ear. But then, of course, the body is making clean and new earwax to replace that old earwax. And so you could envision some kind of self-renewing filter system that could take advantage of those properties where the dirty filter flows away from the clean filter material and allows you to renew the filtering system on an ongoing basis, which would be great to use for electronics that are going into really harsh, dusty environments. They mentioned going to Mars and being able to filter out the dust on the surface of Mars from the electronics.
So again, if you're just joining us, we are with Dr. Fazal Rana. He's VP of Research and Apologetics at Reasons. You can find them online at reasons.org. He's also the author of several books, including Who is Adam?, Creating Life in the Lab, The Cell's Design, and Dinosaur Blood and the Age of the Earth. And in case you're wondering about his scientific street cred, he has a PhD in chemistry with an emphasis in biochemistry from Ohio University. So needless to say, he's quite qualified to discuss the stuff inside our ears. So what makes you so excited about this? Because I can definitely hear the excitement in your voice as we're discussing the applications of earwax and synthetic earwax and its uses in society.
Well, what really makes me excited is this idea that everywhere we turn in biology, the designs that we see are unbelievably remarkable. They're sophisticated. They are clever. Even something as mundane as earwax, which is just these secretions from, sebaceous glands in our ear. You wouldn't think of those materials as being, again, elegantly designed, but yet they are. And so for me, I see those elegant designs as being the handiwork of a creator, the work of a mind. And the fact that you have engineers turning to designs in biology like earwax to inspire new technology really, I think, highlights how remarkable those designs actually are. And in fact, there's a whole area of engineering called biomimetics, where the goal is to copy designs in nature to drive new technology. And if these kind of systems were the product of a blindless, unguided evolutionary process, why would the designs be so elegant? So to me, this fits with a view of the world as the handiwork of a creator, and in my mind raises questions about the capacity of evolutionary mechanisms to truly explain the designs that we see in the living world. Truly fantastic insight from our good friend, Dr. Fazal Rana. You can connect with him on Twitter at RTB_FRANA, and of course with Reasons to Believe, reasons.org. Dr. Fuzz, always a pleasure to have you in Wenz World. Thank you so much for your time. Joey, thanks for having me. God bless you, my friend. You too. Thank you, Dr. Fuzz.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
ラグズとリッチーズラッキーへ、ブーチと WENZ、そしてここ WENZ の世界では、男の子連続ドラマの瞬間があります。
It is time for the male soap opera moment with Rags to Riches Raggy, the Booch and the Wenz right here and only here in Wenz World.
Arigato, my friends, listeners, compadres, frenemies, whoever's listening. Welcome back to Wenz World. with the one, the only, Mr. Vincent J. Bucci.
Indeed.
In the flesh. Shamso is in parts unknown today, so she is not available for the MSOM here in Wenz World. But that's okay, because we have plenty of energy to be expressed to the Wenz World audience. And we shall begin with the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view last Sunday on the WWE Network, which, by the way, you can have for a mere $9.99. And, of course, the night started off Becky Lynch taking on Mickie James, and Becky Lynch got a decent win against Mickie James.
Yeah, I was shocked. I literally thought Mickie was going to take that one because this was her first pay-per-view back, but I guess they really wanted to, get Becky Lynch over. Like, it was one of those matches where it was decent for what it was, but I expected more because it was a pay-per-view. Like, this is the way they wrestle is kind of the way you would wrestle on a SmackDown. I didn't feel this was a pay-per-view level match, but either way, it got a little bit better towards the end, but I felt it was a very slow start.
Of course, the next match to be seen was the handicap match taking place between Dolph Ziggler versus Apollo Crews and Kalisto. What did you like and dislike about this matchup, Booch?
I liked the fact that Apollo Crews got the pinfall. I felt that was great. I've been waiting for this guy to get a push forever, and I literally scream at my TV like, "What is wrong with the booking committee when they're not doing anything with Apollo?" And so to see him get the pin was great. I liked the way Ziggler behaved after the loss. Mm-hmm. I felt that him busting his ankle up with that steel chair definitely allowed the mean streak in Dolph Ziggler to continue. And I think that as a heel, he handled it the way a heel should. So it had a great ending. The only thing I disliked was I felt Dolph should have won the match, but when I saw the way they executed the busted ankle, I kind of let it go.
Yeah, and I thought this is what's going through Ziggler's head. If I'm going to be a jobber, then I'm going to get mine one way or another. And he sure did. He got it twice with that ankle.
Oh, man, he just busted it up. And you could see Apollo sold it really well.
Sure.
So I think that helped them both out. I'm just glad Kalisto wasn't involved in the decision because I feel like he brings nothing to this rivalry.
And my thoughts on the tag team turmoil match. Though the Usos didn't win, they did validate their heel turn by attacking American Alpha after being eliminated.
I can agree with that wholeheartedly, although I will say this. The Ascension should have walked out with those belts. I like American Alpha, don't get me wrong, but I felt that with the way this was set up, when the Usos took them down, and practically they left them laying in the ring, the Ascension's coming out. The Ascension got a pinfall in that 12-man tag the SmackDown prior, so the Ascension had a roll. The Ascension, when they picked him up and hit that fall of man, should have ended right there.
Right.
They should have just ended the match right there.
Jack Gable and Jason Jordan were absolutely gassed before Victor and Connor even entered the squared circle there. But they continue to roll, and they rolled on SmackDown. Moving on to the Natalya Bella match. This feud should have ended at the pay-per-view, but apparently we're going to see more of this to come.
Oh, dear God. What? Obviously, if you listen to anybody that listens to the Boochcast, I had a different opinion about this match. I can't really say it here because we're on the radio, so I'll give you the cleaner version of what I said.
Sure.
This was a disappointment. I am very much against countouts and disqualifications on a pay-per-view. On a Raw and a SmackDown, I get it, because you're building a story.
Sure.
You can give me a double count-out on a SmackDown or a Raw any day of the week, I'll take it. But when you get to the pay-per-view, I need some type of finish, whether it's a roll-up or someone distracts the referee or, there needs to be a decisive winner and loser at the end of a pay-per-view match. I do not believe in countouts and disqualifications because, especially during a time when pay-per-views used to cost like $40-$50,
right?
You're flushing it down the toilet with a double count-out.
And of course, there's no better time to talk about the bearded brawler from the backwoods taking on the Viper himself, RKO Randy Orton.
This was a very good match. I will say there is a part of me as a wrestling fan that felt that they could have done a little bit more, a little bit better. There's things that could have changed in the match, but I felt that this match did what it needed to do because you can't expect a lot of craziness in this match. And if you do, it's mostly going to come from Luke Harper.
Right.
Because they got to protect Randy Orton to make sure he can go to WrestleMania because he is the Royal Rumble winner. So the fact that it was a slow-paced match and had a couple of high spots but nothing too crazy, right, I felt was the right thing to do. So I felt that, and Randy's so great at in-ring psychology that he could put on a match without having to do any of the crazy stuff. So I felt that the match could have been a little bit better, but under the circumstances, it did what it needed to do.
So my takeaways from this match, great out-of-ring action.
Yes.
Out on the apron, by the announce table. That superplex from the top rope by Orton was phenomenal. It literally dropped my jaw. Dropped my jaw, rather. That's an anomaly for the Wenz here. Back-to-back super kicks by Harper. Blow for blow for most of the later part of the match. And, of course, the attempted discus clothesline. And then, from out of nowhere, RKO.
Bam!
Boom! So that's all the time we have for this edition. And I know we didn't even get to Naomi and Alexa Bliss or the 20th Elimination Chamber match itself. But you can get all of that coverage exclusively, unedited, on demand, 24/7, SoundCloud.com up in the search bar, WENZ World. Thanks for listening.
Is debt beating you down? You need discipline. You need the Debt Ninja. If you've been caught in a financial trap and need to be set free, then you need the Debt Ninja. Want to stop those harassing collection calls, start saving thousands in interest and fees, and get out of debt fast? Then you need to call the Debt Ninja. The Debt Ninja will find the best companies across the country that will help you consolidate all your bills into one easy payment, reduce your payments by 30 to 50%, and get you out of debt fast. If you have unsecured debt of $10,000 or more, such as credit cards, loans, or medical bills, call the Debt Ninja for a free 15-minute consultation.
Call 800-826-1246. 800-826-1246. That's 800-826-1246. Call today.
The Debt Ninja.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of the short story through to line edits of the full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it. There to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.